Alright, so we're learning about integers and absolute value. So on the front page, we're learning about integers, and then on the back, we'll learn about absolute value. So first, if we have a set of integers, we can write them like this. So we have parentheses and 3 dots, -3, -2, -1, 0, and then +1, 2, 3 with 3 more dots. So those 3 dots on each end tells me that you can keep counting forever and ever on both sides, the negative side and the positive side. Okay, so it continues indefinitely. And then we can also compare two integers using our inequalities. So does somebody remember what this first one means? Charlie? Less than. Good. And what is that other one?
Greater than.
Greater than. So remember the mouth, whatever the open mouth is, that's greater. And then the small side, that is your less. So small, less, greater, or open, greater than. Okay. Remember the alligator? I know we all learned it like that. So first, in our examples, we want to be able to use an integer to explain a situation. So in example A, it says 16 feet below the surface. So because it's below the surface, it's below 0, we're going to use a -16 to represent that situation. Okay. But B, it says 5 strokes over par. So we're talking about par in golf. It's over par, so that means it would be above 0, meaning that it's a +5. Okay, so anything that means basically below is going to be a negative, and then anything above will be positive. Okay. And then if we look at our number line, of course we've got our 0 in the middle, and then I've got all my positives to the right, all my negatives to the left. If I'm asked to graph a number, that means you're simply just putting a dot on that number line at that number. So like they have graphed 3, -2, -4, and -6. Okay. So on your homework, when it asks you to draw a number line and graph a set of integers, this is what it means. It means putting a dot on that line. Okay. And then we want to be able to actually order them. So figure out which numbers are less than or greater than. So if you look at A, I've got -6 and -2. So is -6 less than or greater than -2? Hudson? Less than? Do we agree? Yeah. So it's kind of opposite. So your higher number is positive. The higher number, the greater the number is, right? But when you're looking at your negative numbers, the higher the actual number is, actually the smaller it is. So they're kind of opposite. And then what about 3 and -4? 3 is what? Greater than -4. Okay. Questions on that? Okay. All right, 1 through 4, we're writing an integer. So if it says 2 inches less than normal, how would I write that? Using an integer. Hudson. -2, because it's less than. What about 13 degrees Fahrenheit above average? Charlie?
13.
Positive 13. What about a deposit of $50? Somebody know what it means to deposit $50? Tanner?
To take out.
Not quite. Aiden?
Put in.
To put in. If I'm depositing $50, that means I'm going to the bank and I'm going to put $50 into my bank account. Okay, so if I'm depositing it, is that going to be a -50 or a positive 50? A positive 50. Okay. So if it says that I withdrew $50 from my bank account, that's when it would be negative. That's when you're taking it out. Okay. And number 4, a loss of 8 yards. How would I write that? -8. Good. Not too bad, right? Pretty simple. All right, 5 through 16, I am just ordering those numbers again. So number 5, I've got 4 and -4. So 4 is what? Greater than -4. 8 is what? Then 12. Less than. Y'all are being quiet. Number 7, -7 is what to -5? -7 is less than -5. 2 and 5. Less than. -1 and +1? Less than. 4 and -3? Greater than. 6 and 8? Less than. Number 12, negative 2 and 12.
Less than.
That is less than. 9 and negative 1.
Greater than.
Greater than. Negative 6 and negative 6. Equal to. Good. 5 and negative 3.
Greater than.
Greater than. And negative 10 and 2.
Less than.
Less than. Good. Questions on any of that? Alright, the back we've got absolute value. Has anybody heard of absolute value before? Yes? So what that is it's the distance from 0. Okay, so absolute value, we're just going to go ahead and shorten it a little bit. We're going to just go ahead and write the distance from 0. So it says numbers on opposite sides of 0 and the same distance from 0 have the same absolute value. So that's just meaning that the absolute value is the distance away that it is from 0. Okay. So if I am on the football field and I'm at the 50-yard line and I go 10 yards to the left, am I going a positive 10 yards or a negative 10 yards? Positive, right? I'm still traveling 10 yards. But if I go to the other side 10 yards, am I going a negative or a positive way? Positive, right? Is there any way for me to go a negative foot? Can I walk a negative foot in the left direction? No, you're still traveling 1 foot at a time, or 10 yards at a time. You can go back, so I could walk to the door 5 feet, and then I could stop, and then I could turn around and walk back 5 feet, but I'm not traveling any type of distance, any type of negative distance, correct? Still going 5 feet in one direction. So is it possible to have a negative distance? No. So, if absolute value is the distance from 0, can I have a negative absolute value? No. Absolute value is standing for distance, and if you can't have a negative distance, then that means you also can't have a negative absolute value, okay? So, if I'm taking the absolute value of a number, that means it's always going to be positive, okay? And then what that looks like is right here. So my absolute value symbol is 2 vertical bars on either side of that number. So this right here, we would say the absolute value of 2. Sorry, the absolute value of 2. And then when I evaluate it, it's positive 2. Because absolute value is always positive. Okay? Same as if I have the absolute value of negative 2. Absolute value is always positive, so when I evaluate it, I get positive 2. So you're basically dropping those bars and that negative sign. Okay? So absolute value of a negative number will always give you a positive number. Just like the absolute value of a positive is going to give you a positive. Okay? So if we look at example A, we've got the absolute value of negative 4. So they showed it to us on a number line. So I went from 0 and I went to the left 4 to get to negative 4. But I still went 4 units from 0. So the absolute value of negative 4 is still just positive 4. Okay. Example B, I've got the absolute value of negative 3 plus the absolute value of 6. So before I can evaluate it, I actually have to solve those absolute values first. So the absolute value of negative 3 gives me positive 3. Absolute value of 6 gives me 6. So now I have the problem 3 plus 6, and I can go ahead and add them, and I get 9. That makes sense? So you've got to solve the absolute values first before you can subtract, divide, add, whatever. Okay. Same for example number 2. We're just bringing that substitution method in that we learned last week. Evaluate the absolute value of x minus 7 if x is negative 8. So I'm going to plug in negative 8 for x. So that gives me absolute value of negative 8 minus 7. I've got to solve the absolute value first. So that gives me a positive 8. And then I still have minus 7, which gives me an answer of 1. Questions? Okay. So looking at example number 1, or problem number 1. If I'm evaluating, what is the absolute value of negative 6? It's just 6. The absolute value of 15? 15. Absolute value of negative 12? 12, positive 12. Absolute value of 21, 21. Absolute value of 4 minus the absolute value of 2. So first you've got to solve the absolute values. So absolute value of 4 would be 4, minus absolute value of 2, which is 2. And then what does it give me? 2. What's the absolute value of negative 8? 8 plus the absolute value of negative 3? 3. So now I have 8 plus 3, which gives me 11. Good. I want to see your steps written out like this on your homework or on our notes. I want to see that you know the absolute value of negative 8 is 8, and you plug it in and you add together to get your answer. Okay. Absolute value of negative 10, 10 minus absolute value of 6. So now I have 10 minus 6, which gives me 4. And that last one, I should have 12 plus 4, which should give me 16. Okay. We good? Okay, now if I'm substituting, so they told me that x is 8, y is negative 3. So number 9, that means I have 12 plus the absolute value of negative 3. So then what's the absolute value of negative 3? 3. So I have 12 plus 3, which gives me 15. Number 10, I should have 8 minus the absolute value of negative 3, once you plug those numbers in, which gives you the problem 8 minus 3, which should give you 5. And number 11, now I have some multiplication. So this means, if I were to read this, it means 2 times the absolute value of x plus 3 times the absolute value of y. So when I plug those numbers in, that means I have 2 times the absolute value of 8 plus 3 times the absolute value of negative 3. Before I can multiply, I need to evaluate the absolute values. So then that means I have 2 times 8. So I'm basically just replacing those absolute value bars with parentheses. Plus 3 times positive 3. So then that gives me 16 plus 9, which gives me a final answer of what? What? Y'all are so shy and quiet. 25. Do I need to do number 12, 13, and 14? Or are we good? Okay. Any questions for me? No? I have a worksheet for you to practice. It is exactly like these notes. So you